Theo, are there?
Hi everyone, bom dia.
Good evening, good afternoon. Thanks Theo for being us today, and thank you DCU.lab for the partnership. And I'm very happy to have you here, Theo. And I'm really looking forward for your lecture today. So I'm really going to enjoy this. And now it's up to you, Theo. Take your time. Thank you.
Okay, hi everybody. I apologize for my lack of Portuguese, and I will try and speak slowly. And if there's any questions, please ask Kleber, and we'll try and answer them later. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about some of my views on digital marketing in particular, and Kleber asked me to talk about some of the implications for small businesses in particular and SMEs. So maybe a tiny bit about me. I set up and sold 3 software companies some time ago now. I'm getting older. And then I kind of retired into academia, into university life, where I teach digital business and strategy and digital marketing. And I suppose Ireland is a particularly good place to be based for those activities, because outside of America, we're the #1 software exporter in the world. So Ireland's extremely small compared to Brazil. In the total of our entire island, we only have 6 million people. So we're probably smaller than most of your cities. But after America, we are the 2nd largest ICT exporter. So when you think about Facebook or Twitter or Google or Shopify or Spotify or any of those companies, their international headquarters are typically in Dublin. And we're the gateway to Europe for American companies and the gateway to America for European companies. So it's a great place to do digital research, but also, our digital marketing programs and our digital business programs are in the top 50 worldwide at master's level. So we're particularly excited about the relationship that we've developed with our Brazilian partners, Kleber and Patricia in UFPE and UFP, and obviously in Yao Pessoa, and delighted to have been to visit your university last year. And so today we're going to talk a bit about where digital is and where it's going. It's always a bit of a dangerous thing, because there's this thing called the future fallacy. And so when we're setting the scene, we often think out into the future and say, this is how we think things are going. But inevitably, things don't go that way. I know that your college is very media and communications oriented, and I was looking back at postcards from the late 19th century. So this would have been around 1890 in France. And there was an artist called Jean Coté, and he was commissioned to design postcards about what the future would look like in the year 2000. And it's not that bad, So if you see here, he's kind of got video conferencing going on. So that, this is me and Kleber presenting to this lady in a mirror, and he has microscopes. So you can see here that they have the idea of microscopes there, and robot hoovers, so robo vacuum, and then other things maybe not as accurate. So we're still not building buildings. The architect isn't building a building using by himself, but we do have agricultural tech, particularly in Brazil. We have large-scale tech doing the harvesting, and we have this idea of being able to genetically produce livestock. Of course, education is slightly different, but maybe this is quite realistic now, is that the professor's up there throwing the knowledge into a machine, and you guys download it in a whole variety of ways, obviously, and Zoom being the most recent of these type of innovations. So, so when you predict the future, you can get it very badly wrong. So what's quite interesting, and what I ask my students is, when you look at this, you immediately think that this is a picture, or this is the Earth. And in fact, before 1960, we had no idea that the Earth looked like this. So we had no proof that it looked like this. And this, it would have been a mind breaking transformation, showing someone a picture of the Earth from space. And we now we look at this and we think, oh, that's clearly Earth. But obviously it's a picture, And this guy is a French philosopher called Baudelaire. If you're a Matrix fan, he wrote the book Simulacra and Simulacrum, which is a big part of the Matrix, but it's where Neo keeps his hidden stash of files in his book, A Hollowed Out Version's book. And what Baudelaire is particularly interested in is whether we create our own realities, and is the reality that we're consuming today real at all, or just something that marketers have invented for our consumption. When we look at Disneyland, it's both a fictional place and a real place. But the rules of normal reality don't bear out in Disneyland. I remember going to Disneyland 20 years ago with a colleague from work, and she brought her daughter with us, and the daughter was 5 years old. And I was taking at the time, this lady had to go to the restroom, and she asked me would I mind her child. And the kid got very upset. Immediately, these people came from nowhere, workers in Disneyland, and brought us to this room. And I said, why are you bringing us here? And they said, oh, we don't like kids crying at Disneyland. Everybody's happy at Disneyland. So Disneyland is a place where everybody is happy and where the normal rules don't apply. And at the same time, I remember for a long period of time, if you had a beard, like Cleve or Ricardo, you wouldn't be allowed work in Disneyland because, Disney workers don't have beards, don't have facial hair. So when we say that Disneyland is a real place, it's a real place, but it doesn't have real rules, and it doesn't operate by what we think is a natural place, a natural way to behave. And so reality is often what we have in our head. And when we think about all the things that, all the ideas and all the different ways that we consume media, what the reality that we are creating is very, very different than what could have been imagined years and years and years ago. And now we're in what's called the fourth industrial revolution. If you take when Cote designed his postcards, he was looking into Industry 2.0 when machines and mechanization had come to the fore in European industry. And when we get to the 70s, we have computers and electronics. And only in the last 5 to 10 years, we've kind of reached this point where we have this cyber-physical integration of the Internet of Internets. We have networking. And that's causing massive disruption, but also is changing how we conceive reality. And we're in this period of continuous industry transformation. And what's exciting to me about this is that when I work with Cleve or Patricia or even De Silva in Natal, these same trends, these innovation accelerators are changing Brazil in the same way that they're changing the rest of the world. Whether it's mobile technologies, cloud computing, big data analytics, social media and social business, sensors, blockchain, these technologies are coming together and they're accelerating how we use other technologies, whether those things are robots, natural interfaces, 3D printing, security, and are changing how we work, how we buy, the immediacy of how we do things, and how things are personalized. And when you layer an additional complexity on top of that, things like deep learning and artificial intelligence, what we get to is a point where it's transforming financial services, e-commerce, health, travel and tourism. And COVID-19 is particularly interesting because obviously it's something that's impacting how we both interact with each other on a social basis, but also how we work and how we study. And in fact, what we find is COVID-19 is probably the greatest innovation accelerator in terms of digital technologies, but also pharmaceutical development that we've ever seen. So even though Donald Trump and I'm sure President Bolsonaro want a vaccine in the next month, there is no doubt that the fact that there are 300 vaccine candidates rapidly hurtling towards the point of being released to the public in less than a year, that's a phenomenal achievement and a phenomenal acceleration of research and development. And that's made possible by big data analytics and by new technologies. And so naturally, we expect those technologies to transform business and marketing and communications. And so it is possible that we have reached a point where post-humanism is here. I noticed on the walls of Ricardo's room, his office there, he had the Black Knight, and he also had a manga poster. And I was thinking, is there no greater symbiosis of human and machine than Batman? And we all want to be Batman because Batman's real. Everything you see in Batman is just technology and human endeavor. But when we think about how humans and machines interact today, and we think about even this event where I'm talking to you from Ireland, several thousand miles away on the other side of the Atlantic, and I'm delivering a lecture to Brazilians, it's a phenomenal achievement. But my daily routine is a constant interaction between me and machines. And that acceleration, and particularly COVID-19's role in that acceleration, is worthy of further exploration. What I no longer leave my house. The first thing I check for is my key. The first thing I check for is my smartphone. So the most important thing that we have after our family is our devices. And that leads to a new type of consideration about what it means to be human today when we no longer can interact with each other in the same physical way that we could a year ago. And when we think about realities, and I think often about my 13-year-old son, and he's obsessed with Xbox, whether it's Minecraft or Overwatch or Fortnite, it doesn't really matter. And what matters is he can represent himself in those virtual worlds created on those game consoles, and he can be whoever he wants to be in those. He can be Lionel Messi, or he can be Ronaldo, the Brazilian Ronaldo, not the Portuguese one. He can be anyone he wants in these virtual worlds. And it used to be that you played these games, but now the game console is also a social milieu. That's where he communicates with his friends. They talk, they play online, and not only in terms of playing the game, that's how they hang out, particularly in COVID-19. And so when we're in lockdown, we're not allowed to visit other families. That's where we see the Xbox become central to a large class of the population. It becomes about the communication device, but also an entertainment device. And when we think about other devices, Nintendo Wii now is old tech, but what is Nintendo Wii when we look at this? It's people in the real world playing tennis in a virtual tennis court and virtual world, where their real world actions have consequences in that virtual world. And so we are truly at a point where we can say that hyperreality does exist. And what's more, we can say that hyperreality exists in a number of different types of ways. Things that we often think were fictional, whether they are mobile phones or tablets, and we watched them in Star Trek in the 60s, they're now real. So things that we can imagine, fictional things that can only exist in virtual worlds, can now migrate to the real world. But also, things that can only exist in computer synthesized worlds can be migrated to the real world. So we can design things in virtual worlds or in digital worlds, and we can use them in the real world. We can also design real world objects and use them in virtual worlds. So we have this commingling of the fictional and the computer synthesized and the real physical world. And how we market in those kind of contexts is quite interesting. If we take, for instance, Harry Potter, and we all know Harry Potter, I don't know what it's called in Brazil, but Harry Potter exists in all these worlds. Most of us read the book, and in the book there's Bertie Bott's ever flavor beans. We have these magical candy that when you eat them, a different flavor happens, and that appears in the film. So if you didn't read the books and saw the films, it says it. If you played the video game, you get energy by eating the Bertie Bott's ever flavor beans. But the reality now is you can buy those Bertie Bott's ever flavor beans in shops. So something that was a fictional device in a novel, not an even important part of that novel, and was then in a film. So someone took that fictional text of this thing that's described in a book, and they said, let's make that into a product and we'll visualize that in a film. And then they took that from the film and put it in the video game, and now it's a real product. And so in one sense, Bertie Bott's ever flavor beans is a truly hyper-real product. It exists in all those worlds. Duff beer from The Simpsons, same thing. Duff beer, you can buy it. A Mexican brewery company brews it. So actually how we think about reality is changing in very tangible ways. And how we interact with society, each other, and machines is changing. And it's changing in terms of the width and range of what we do, but it's also changing in terms of the amount of time that we're logged on. And you have this idea of homo connectus, where we're always connected to a network. What we're seeing in one sense is that instead of being hunters and gatherers in the forest, we're now hunters and gatherers in electronic forests. We go out every day to look for our entertainment or our news, or if you're in the creative arts, we're looking for media to work with. And whether that's a good thing in terms of the trajectory of humans isn't quite clear, because what will this lead to? A social isolation of multiple people always logged in but never interacting with each other. So the rest of this presentation is a bit more marketing and business oriented, but it builds on these themes. So, Brazil and Ireland, America, we all, to some extent, have experienced the same change in how we consume media. I'm from the west coast of Ireland, which is the furthest point in the European side of the Atlantic. And when I was a kid, we only had 2 TV channels. That was the case all the way up to the 1980s. We only had 2 television channels. And up until that point, the family would gather around and we would watch TV and we would listen to the radio, etc. And media had our time, they had our attention, and they had our trust. And that certainly was the case in the US. And then with the onslaught of cable TV and then satellite TV, what we see is a lot more TV channels. So we have a lot more product choice, a lot more media. And then the World Wide Web comes into play, and suddenly consumers are able to publish. And that particular technology accelerates dramatically to the point where we get to Facebook, and literally you need no skills to publish your opinion on the internet. And from a marketing perspective, the market is no longer in control. In the 50s through to the 90s, if you were a marketer, you're a producer, you buy your advertising, you sponsor your programming, you buy your billboards, you put your ads in newspapers, and you are in control of broadcasting that message. If someone is upset, they might tell 10 people. If they're happy, they might tell 4 people. By the time that you get to 2010, people could tell thousands of people if they're upset, because they just broadcast that on Facebook or they broadcast that on the internet. And the reason that it's a particularly complex space for business people, and in particular marketers, is everything in business and marketing is about plans. And we will plan out what we're going to do to persuade people to buy our product, listen to our message, etc., over a 3 to 5 years. It's very rational. And then the reality is that is based on the idea that people are rational. And what we know is that people are not rational. They don't think about what they're hearing and then do something and feel it afterwards. What they do is they feel and then they do something, and then they think. And on something like social media, that is particularly hard to control. So what we have is people reacting instantly to stimulus that they get, and then they do something, and afterwards they post-rationalize that. So we're in an age not only of post-humanism, we're in an age of post-rationalism. And so what Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize for this work, found is that 95% of our decision-making is emotional, and only 5% is rational. And that is the challenge of the lifetime for marketers today, that when they're on social media, people are responding to the emotional stimulus instantly, and they get a lot of stimulation. And that's kicking off oxytocin in the brain, and they want more stimulation. And for marketers, that's incredibly difficult to control, and it's very difficult to plan and to do successfully. Again, when we think about things, we often forget there was life before Google. There was a time, and many of you are probably too young enough to remember this, but there was a time when, if you wanted a toy and you saw something on the TV, your parents would just go, yeah, tough luck. Where will I find out that information? So if a new product came out, unless it was in a local shop, it was nearly impossible for someone to find out information about that product and where they could buy it. The idea that you would flick through a large telephone directory seems quaint and somewhat like a historical anachronism now. But the reality was, up until the 1990s, there was no real way to find out about new products other than through television and newspapers and magazines. And then if you wanted to get more information, there was a lag of several weeks often to get that information. Now we have near instantaneous satisfaction of our questions and queries through Google. And we've moved from an interruption-based marketing model to a permission-based marketing model. So if you're watching your soap opera in Brazil or your football game in Brazil, the goal of the advertisement and the goal of the media company, the television company, was to interrupt your enjoyment to give you a marketing message. It's, as the Rolling Stones, it's a satisfaction type thing. I've just realized you probably are too young to even know the word satisfaction anymore. But the key thing here is every time that you want to watch your soap opera, you get to the cliffhanger, bang, we need to have an advertisement. And so they're interfering with your enjoyment of the media. And now we've moved to a permission-based model where effectively we search on the internet and Google sends us back advertising, and they're basically asking us for permission to advertise to us because we have to click on that advertisement to get more information. And it's the same with Facebook, etc. And we have push and pull strategies. And, so some advertising is being pushed at us, but more and more often we pull that marketing to us by telling the advertisers and the big data engines, this is what I'm interested in. This is my personality. These are the types of products and services I buy. And that's what gets pushed to us. So on top of that, we can actually try and get customers to make their own advertising. So now we see that not only can consumers tell us what they want, but consumers can create the ads. And what we have is a whole variety of different types of advertising. But that comes with a risk, because you know what? Not all customers can be trusted with brands. And I was going to show you some video there, but I'm not confident in the internet. And on top of this idea that the consumer has control, we have this idea of the fierce urgency of now, where everything must be immediate. Every need must be satisfied now. And when we think about that, we need to think about how fast technology is being absorbed into our lives. Telephone took 85 years to become a mainstay of modern life. A smartphone only took 13 years. So when we think about things like digital assistants or even smart glasses, we think that they're going to be integrated and assimilated into our lives much faster than the past. Even if you think about the car taking 71 years to become a mainstay of life. And now you look at the amount of electric scooters everywhere, or even electric vehicles, or even internet technology in cars. It's a massive transformation, and it's getting faster. And the amount of things that happen in 1 minute is just mind-boggling. You're talking about 188 million emails sent in a minute. 1 million views of Twitch. There's only so much Fortnite that you can watch on Twitch. Nearly, $1 million are spent online in e-commerce. Netflix, we're nearly watching 750,000 hours of Netflix in a minute. So there's a vast amount of things happening. And for a marketer, you're trying to absorb all these activities and understand how do you exploit them. And there's a significant challenge and an important question to be asked about whether we can adapt to that velocity and volume of data and of applications and content. Whether we can manage all the apps that we're interacting with. And so on one side, we want instant gratification and immediacy of need satisfaction. On the other side, the sheer deluge of applications and devices to meet those needs overwhelms our relatively simplistic brain. So much so that 67% of Irish people use the phone in the bathroom. And I'm pretty sure this is the same for Brazil. We're not even giving ourselves enough time to go to the bathroom. That's how bad things are. Now, the only good thing about statistics on Irish bathroom use of smartphones is that British people use the phone more in the bathroom. But when you think about this, one statistic is that we literally cannot put down our phone to go to the bathroom. That is a particularly damning indictment of modern life. And so we feel that we have an accelerated pace of life, and that technology is driving that acceleration of life. And actually a word for that, it's a German word, it's called Einkrankheit, and it means hurry sickness. And actually, the fact that we are so accelerated, that life is so fast and fast moving, and technology is pushing us down the road, and we have to answer to all these things, is making us slightly ill. And at the same time, actually business doesn't change that much. So the cadence of business, although we think it's accelerated, is not accelerating as fast as the consumers are. And that could be a problem, that we're just not moving as fast as the market. And behind all this is the idea of big data. And big data is driving this because for the first time in this century or in our existence, the last 3 years we've produced more data than the entire of humanity before us. We're producing so much data that we don't know what to do with it all. And Einstein had this famous saying that not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that we can count counts. Most of this content is useless content. And we have this thing, data is the new oil. Now, at first I thought this was bad for Brazil because you have so much oil. But on the other hand, you're so big, you're probably going to be oil rich and data rich. So, I think Brazil is one of these markets where I think the potential is amazing. But everyone's looking at, can I get more data? What can I tell from the data? And we have this idea of big data. And big data is we've got massive volumes. We've got massive speed of data. We've got a variety of data. It's not just text and numbers. It's images and video and documents. And then, and this is the critical thing, is we have the veracity of that data. Because the one thing we know is we can't necessarily trust that data. We're not certain of that data. And we know that because even in COVID-19, I'm not so sure we can trust what our governments are telling us about that data. And that has led to more consumer surveillance. And consumer surveillance is not news. Consumer surveillance goes back to the 19th century. So that same point in time that Jean Cote is designing his postcards about the future of humanity in the year 2000, Archibald Crosley and Arthur Nielsen are sending out coupons with Singer sewing machines, trying to understand what the buying behavior of the American mother is when it comes to sewing machines. And they're offering her discounts and coupons if they give information. And what they pioneered was going through people's bins, through their garbage cans, and finding out data and saying, what do people really consume? What products do they buy? And what does that tell us about the market? And we're all now connected and networked. So this is a picture of my LinkedIn social graph from 5 or 6 years ago. And from this graph, I can tell that I'm influential. And I can, because the blue part of this is people who I worked with in America on e-learning. And the red part are people who I worked with in nightclubs. And the green part are people I worked in university. And they're not connected together. So when I send a message, I'm hitting thousands of people, not just on the first hop, but multiple hops. And so I have new theories around networks. I can look at networks and say that person's influential, not because when he puts out a message, it hits 5 or 6 people. And this is what would have been common in the 1950s and 60s, because it hits thousands. So every customer represents a node in a network of thousands of people that they may influence in very, very small ways, but possibly important ways. And we don't understand the strength of individuals in these new networks. What does it mean when you have 1,000 friends on Facebook? What does it mean when you have 3,000 likes on Instagram? We don't know what these things mean, but we know that in infinitesimally small measures, they mean something. And so, in one sense, because we're so connected and our life is so accelerated and integrated with technology, we live in this interactive realm where every action and transaction generates information about itself. Every time we do something, every time we click on something, every time we buy something, it creates this metadata, this vast amount of data that actually tells us more and more, not only about that particular transaction, that particular action, but those people and consumers, and what's more, the people that they're interacting with. And so when we talk about Twitter, we talk about a tweet, and I think we're going to present some of this data on Wednesday. Each tweet is 160 or 170 pieces of data. Each tweet, not each account. So when we say Klebe has a Twitter account, what we actually mean is Klebe may have sent 2,000 tweets, and that's 2,000 by 190 pieces of data. We can tell a vast amount of things about Klebe, whether his personality, his psychological profile, his buying interests, who's related to, all these things, just from tweets. And the dream, and I'm not sure it's reality or not, is that for marketers, what we want to do is to sense what customers will want next and know what they will ask for before they request it. In one sense, we're like the Minority Report of marketers. What we want to be is be able to predict what you want, satisfy it, and you just go, wow, that's amazing. And when we think about Google, they're close. We're, BERT, which is their new deep learning algorithm for search, is trying to complete tasks in search. So it's trying to address your search query within 0.3 of a second. With our very simplistic meat brains, that looks like near real time. How did I know what I was looking for? Oh, wow, there it is. If you search for large landmark in Paris, Google knows that that's the Eiffel Tower without us even saying Eiffel Tower. So in one sense, technology is moving to a point where it is virtually magic for most people. And so everybody is watching you to get this data. So Google's watching us, which is not a big surprise. Facebook is watching us. But our TVs are watching us. We used to watch TV. Now the TV is watching us. And, we're on our tablets. We're on our smartphones. We're talking to our smartphones. Apps, Google Watch, all these things are listening to us. They're watching us, and we're talking to them. And it doesn't matter whether it's a car, whether it's Spotify glasses. And then the latest thing is not Google glasses, but a Google lens. And what's important about this Google lens is not that it exists, but can you imagine having a contact lens that is connected to the internet at all times? And even today, this lens will be able to take a glucose test to see what your diabetes and sugar levels are. And it sends that to your phone onto the internet. Imagine what that's going to be like in the future. It's a contact lens that corrects your vision, that takes your glucose tests, and it sends data to your phone and to the internet for analysis. Over time, once they've worked out all that, it's only a question of time before they can allow us to have real-time access to the internet. What does that do to our brain, which hasn't been designed to take in all these inputs? So we're at this tipping point in the context of technology and the symbiosis of humans and technology. And, we spend more and more time. What does it mean to spend all this time on Zoom? We're constantly on Zoom now. And, we're multitasking. You go into a modern family, it's not, let's all watch TV together. It's, let's all watch TV. And while we're watching TV, we're going to be on phones, on tablets, and laptops, etc. And consumers understand very little about the intricacies and complexities of this other reality that exists behind the internet. If you're a Stranger Things fan, there's this other world, the upside down world on the internet too, where it's people who are just watching your data. So you're watching TV, your TV is collecting all this data. And in one sense, ignorance is strength, because consumers don't really want to think about that. So consumers will do whatever they need to do to avoid that anxiety, because they want to use the internet, they want to watch TV, and they want to use their smartphones, they want to look at Facebook. They don't want to think about how people are using their data. So there's a trust avoidance type of scenario going on. And 84% of marketers believe personalization is really, really important, and it gives retention and loyalty. And data is what you need to personalize internet services. But consumers don't get that value. They're just not seeing the value. In fact, quite a lot of them had a creepy brand experience, okay? Because it's clunky. And so what we need to do is better personalization. At the same time, we have all this opportunity to do advertising, and we're marketers where I'm from. But the same thing that was true in 1920 is true today, is that half the money that we spend in advertising is wasted. Only now we know which half is wasted. And so optimization becomes the key function of the marketing practitioner. Because ultimately we still think advertising is false. We accept it's false. We know it's false. But the reality is we still, as marketers, we still have to advertise and make people aware of our products, make them feel more positively about our brands, and ideally drive them to buy our products. And the problem is, not only do we find advertising false, but increasingly we don't trust other people. And here's some data. Brazil and Ireland are surprisingly in the same category here. So, most people would seem in other countries trust more than we do. Now, if you'll notice, Ireland is one of the least trustworthy countries in the world. So we, as a consumer population, we really don't trust people. Brazil, slightly better. But if you look here, Brazil is in the trusting part of the sector. Ireland is in the distrusting side of the market. So in Ireland, we don't trust business. In Brazil, you trust business. Okay? Ireland, we don't trust government. Okay? Brazil, you don't trust government. So we have something in common. Now, the difference here is we don't trust, a lot of people trust the media. Brazil don't trust the media. Ireland don't trust the media. So interestingly enough, Brazil believe that advertising platforms are responsible for fake news and should be held accountable. You don't trust government. You don't trust the media. Okay? But you trust business. And so marketers and businesses in Brazil have a real opportunity to become the trusted information provider to the Brazilian market. And who do we trust? We trust company technical experts and academics and people like us. And that's why social media is very powerful, because social media is where we find and talk to people like us. Obviously, universities where we get academic experts and then company technical experts. And this is not wholly surprising, even in the context of COVID-19 in Brazil. We did a project with University Federale de Pernambuco and University Federal de Rio Grande. And what we find is that the data from Google Community Reports and the In Loco consumer app, the shopping app, provide us with more accurate data on social isolation than the government websites. And so actually the best sources of validated information would seem to be the businesses. And if that is the case and Brazilian consumers trust businesses more, then that is an opportunity for businesses to become the leaders and the validators of information. And the question is whether they will do that. And so what is digital marketing in that context? Well, digital marketing is not that different than marketing. If marketing is the activity and set of institutions and processes for creating and communicating, delivering, exchanging offerings that have value for customers and clients, partners, and society, then digital marketing is just delivering that by any digital means. It's not that much more complex. You know, it's the same fundamental building blocks are there. You know, segmentation, targeting, positioning. But the vehicle for doing that and the data that we have is much more advanced. So digital marketing is not always online marketing. I think that's very important. It can be digital and offline. And so what we're trying to do, whether someone is online or offline, is to use digital devices to reach consumers at the moment that most influence their decisions. And those decisions may be multi-step decisions. They don't always have to be sell, sell, sell. In fact, there may no longer be hard sell or soft sell, but just smart sell or not smart sell. And so what we're trying to do is influence and persuade people. And the traditional funnel, which goes from awareness to purchase, and sometimes it's called AIDA, or there's a whole variety of different types of funnels. This no longer makes sense because the customer decision journey now starts with a set of brands that they find on the internet, and they add and subtract those brands as they do more research and as they talk to their friends through social media and reviews. And then they select a brand. But then after they select that brand, the experience that they have with that brand and product, they share that back on the internet. And because they share that back on the internet, we no longer have a linear journey that finishes. Rather, we have a continuous circular loyalty loop. And that means that for marketers, we constantly have to be ensuring that the consumer is satisfied. And from the academic perspective, this allows us to separate out different types of marketing outcomes. We're no longer simply trying to get a purchase. What we're trying to do is increase awareness. We're trying to increase the number of times that our brand or product features wherever in this digital environment, that people recognize our products and brands, and that they understand that it's salient, that they understand that that product and brand has some kind of relevance to the needs that they have. And we're also trying to make sure that they identify with those products and that they not only think favorably about those products, but if they think negatively, they move to neutral, and if neutral to positive. We ideally want them to advocate for our products. We want them to promote and influence others by saying, I like this product, you should buy this product. And then we want them to express their intention to purchase the product, but not only to express brand choice and purchase, but to increase the usage of that product. So from a digital perspective, digital technology gives us a lot more data on this whole richness of behaviors that someone can have with our brand, but we're not constrained to the physical locations of retail outlets. We now can go online and place our brand throughout the internet, and we can click down to see how successful that is. And the digital marketer, you could be confused by thinking that we're interested in all these kind of activities, but really we're interested in traffic. So how many people are exposed to our brand or come to our website, come to our home base, how many of those we convert into customers, and then what the average order value is. So if you're a small to medium-sized business or a startup and you're at this event, this is all that you're interested in. You're interested in how many people are going to see my brand, how many of those will convert into customers, how can I increase the average order value that they're spending with me, and what does that translate to in terms of revenue. And you can take all the other stuff that we talk about and all my philosophical wanderings, but this is what it comes down to. And there's a tension between tools and strategy, and you go into digital marketing and you're talking to people and saying, oh, I want to use Twitter, I want to use Instagram, I want to use YouTube. It doesn't really make any difference what tool you want to use. And then there's another thing, but I want to talk about strategy. And for the people who can afford the time to deliver on strategy, that's great. But for small businesses, strategy equates to tools. And so we have to cross that particular hurdle. We have to say, look, we need a balance between strategy and tools. And there's all these frameworks, and the frameworks actually don't change anything. Fundamentally, these frameworks just take what we know about marketing and say, here's some digital buzzwords that we can stick next to them. But the reality is much more complex. So in our program, this is what we teach. We spend a year with students teaching digital marketing, largely from 5 or 6 key perspectives. Search, so how do I do search engine advertising, search engine optimization, analytics, emerging tech, things like statistical ID, augmented reality, virtual reality, micro-locations, things like that, IoT, commerce, so e-commerce, etc., social media, and then programmatic advertising is the big thing that we're looking at the moment. So everything around advertising technologies, and that's a very, very complex space. And that space bears no resemblance to what someone studied in university 10 years ago. And if you think that most marketing directors or chief marketing officers in large companies in Brazil, they're going to be somewhere between 30 and 60 years old. And all of this is largely new. So they don't know anything about this. And their ability to acquire and assimilate this knowledge into their thinking is extremely limited. And that is the challenge for Brazilian universities, the same challenge for Irish universities, for American universities, etc. And what's more, for each of these things, the rate of acceleration within each of these topics is massive. When we talk about emotion detection, artificial intelligence, we're at the early years of these technologies, and they're changing rapidly. And our ability to absorb all this new information, particularly as we get older, is incredibly difficult. So selecting the right mix of tools is incredibly complex and involves what choice do I have, how fast they're changing, their strengths and weaknesses, which part of the funnel do they support, how do I evaluate these things, and then how do I measure whether they work. And on top of that, we have all these things where traditional and digital come together. So we have this idea of omni-channel or multi-channel marketing. But when we try and merge traditional and digital marketing, what we have is this, we can have a misalignment between the speed and the cadence of those technologies, the transaction costs, market research, new product development, customer interaction, targeting, creative measure. They are all different and require absolutely new skills. And so that changes everything about how we organize our marketing organization. So where do we get the data specialists who are also marketing specialists? Where do we get the partners that are going to deliver us with the underlying technology platforms? And how do we build a culture that is agile and can fail fast so we can learn and try out new marketing technologies quickly? I'm going to end this talk just talking about customer experience for 10 or 15 minutes. Because I think customer experience is, first of all, I think it's incredibly important for communication students. Secondly, I think it's incredibly important for small businesses and startups. And thirdly, I kind of like these slides, so I'm going to talk about them. And the reason that I want to talk about customer experience has been shown to deliver massive value for business. Whether it's brand awareness, toy satisfaction, average order value, customer retention, faster revenue growth. If I have a better customer experience online or offline, it drives significant value. And when we look at 16,000 hours of customer interviews, what do we find out? One, lots of companies think that their customers understand their products. They don't. Most customers don't understand products and services at the same degree that you do. And if they do, your products are that simple, but then you're in a different marketing environment. Two, we know everything we need to know about our customers. You don't. Your customers, no one knows as much as they can know about their customers, right? Because you do not have the time, the ability, and the resources to know everything that you need to know about your customers. And three, our customers they love us, they won't leave us, and they need us. They're never going to leave us. They might, and they might because someone will come along and offer them better customer experience at a lower price. And maybe the better customer experience, they're willing to pay a premium. Let me give you an example. Rent the Runway is a very good example of a solution to fast fashion. So it's the idea here is you can rent designer dresses from this Rent the Runway website. They send you a designer dress. You can wear it for a day or a night or a week, and you pay for that instead of buying the dress and you return it. And they're based in San Francisco, and their assumptions were customers know who designers are, they're familiar with designer brands, and they value those. They know how much a designer dress costs, so they know that they're getting a great deal when they rent these dresses. And they want the most seasonal dresses that are there. So they want the on-season trendy dress, okay? Now, the reality is really different. When they went to talk to their customers, what they found out was that most of their customers couldn't pronounce designer names, let alone know who those designers were. Most of the customers thought that actually they could get cheaper dresses in their local stores than the ones that they were renting, because basically they might have been getting a Versace black dress, and then they go to the local store and they can get a black dress for half the cost, and no one knows whether it's Versace or not. And the reality was that most customers didn't care about the trends and didn't even know what was popular that season. And so the difference, the incongruence between the reality and their business planning assumptions was massive. Now, luckily, they changed to address that and they've been successful. But the reality is we make assumptions based on our conflated understanding of the market as opposed to the reality of what the data is telling us. Customers define customer experience around every point of contact that they have with you or your brand. So a high-value customer experiences, they hit every point. They're all the different elements of the media mix, right? But more importantly, high-quality experiences have to be maintained through the relationship. And whether it's Ireland or Brazil or the US or wherever, everyone is tired of just being sold. And as soon as you buy the product, they forget about you, okay? And when we talk about customer experiences, we want that to be personalized. We're not entirely sure what personalized means, but it has something to do with meeting my needs, messages that communicate to me, they're timed to me, they're frequent enough, but not too much. And I receive those messages the way I want to receive those messages. And if I'm going to give you data, and I'm going to give you my preference data, my personal data, I expect to get value back in those experiences. What does that sound like? Well, when you talk to customers, this is what they say. Relationship, you guys are about buy and die. The fastest way to be forgotten is to buy from you. We buy, you disappoint, and you disappear without a trace, except for the monthly bills. I want more than just buying history-based emails. With today's technology, I expect the experiences in emails to reflect my preferences. People are disappointed. People just think, As soon as I buy something, they forget about me until the next time they want my money. That is not a relationship. And so this is the traditional funnel. This is the traditional customer experience from a marketing perspective. I have owned and earned media, and I'm marketing out to you on search and social. And then I'm hitting you at YouTube with free white papers and emails and books. And then when you've decided that it's between 2 or 3 people, maybe I'm doing some evaluation content saying, look, here's a comparison of my product and service versus my competitors. And then there's some kind of sales interaction, and bang, you've bought the product. But the reality is, with the big data we have now, we should be pre-targeting to put something new in front of customers. We should be onboarding customers once they buy something so that they feel that they're valued as a customer. We should be anticipating issues that they're having, particularly when they engage with us less. We should be giving immediate responses to negative experiences. And we should be appreciating our customers. We should be giving them surprise and delight. You know, when they are with us, it shouldn't be, I'm only contact you when it is expected. What I love about my most favorite brands is the unexpected value that I get. And then there should be value add. There should be cross-selling, upselling. There should be kind of linkage that give me a personalized, repeated experience. And that means I should be part of a community, and that I should be feeding into that brand experience. And through dialogue, that experience improves and becomes more personal. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen, because what actually happens is that people have premature renewals, so they're trying to actually sell us constantly. When I'm in a community and I'm talking to other people who love this product or brand, I don't want people selling to me. I want to talk to people about how they use the product or brand. And the key question in customer experiences, and for marketers, and if you're a small business, this is the key question that you have to answer, is what was the catalyst that finally made you buy a product? Okay, so for instance, what was the catalyst that finally made you buy a new suitcase? Now, the reason I'm using this as an example is because every time I go and visit Cleve or Patricia or Ivan in Brazil, my clothes go missing, so I lose my luggage, okay? And so often I go there and I have to buy new clothes. But, you know, if you went to Amazon.com and started searching for luggage or a new suitcase, they would suddenly start sending you emails about suitcases and bags. But it's not based on my need, because when I want to buy a new suitcase, and I've bought 8 to 10 different new suitcases, the actual reasons for that are quite random. So the first suitcase I bought, my old suitcase broke. So that's why I bought a suitcase. Second suitcase was stolen. Third one is I got a new job and I was going to be flying a lot, so I thought I should have a suitcase that reflected my new seniority. I got into a loyalty club in the airline. I didn't want to go into business class with a really bad suitcase, so I bought a new suitcase. And then I got married, and my wife and I decided we want matching suitcases, which is very nice. And then we had a baby, and those matching suitcases were useless, so we had to buy a new suitcase. And then I was in China with students. I bought too much fake stuff, so I had to buy a fake branded suitcase to put the fake Chinese stuff into the suitcase. And then I broke my arm. They're all reasons I bought a suitcase. You cannot answer the reason of why did I buy a suitcase from the data that I use on social media. There is no way of answering that particular question from my social media or my search behavior, etc. So traditional analytics won't necessarily help you answer those questions, but human data might. Woo, we like the data, okay? And the real question is, where do we get human data? And human data means, do we get data from the customers, from our own systems, so first-party data? Do we get it from our partners, second-party data, or third-party data? And some of the social media data helps to answer those questions. So one of the big problems is you might not know what first-party, second-party, and third-party data means. So imagine we have data that people volunteer. That's first-party data. And then there's second-party data, which is data that we can add to that from other sources. And then there's implied data. So we can use systems to extract insights when we marry those two pieces of data. And then we can buy in third-party data about where those people hang out, and we can target them. So based on the data to volunteer that we can buy or have in our own systems or imply, we can then use that data to build profiles of our customers and then buy access to them through Facebook or Google, etc. And there's a vast array of different types of data out there for us to drag in. So we have your sign-on credentials, we can buy third-party public data. Obviously, we have cookies and pixels and retargeting, device IDs that we're pulling off you all the time. And then there's who you're connected to and how you behave online and your attitude, etc. We build these models of you. And we use that data then to give you some kind of personalized experience. I'm not going to dwell on this, but this is kind of half technology, half data analyst, and half marketing. And new technologies like machine learning and deep learning, they fill in the gaps. So I might have all this patchy data in my system today, but what's exciting about the future is that machine learning can fill in these gaps and give me a really good picture and predict whether a particular user wants to buy a product. And very few companies are using data to answer key strategic questions. So when we look at this kind of ladder for analytics maturity, it goes from merely reporting what happened to prescribing what actions can be taken or should be taken based on data patterns. And when we analyze that up, only 1 to 4% are at this pattern analysis stage. So most companies are just reporting data. Somewhere between 77 and 78%, maybe up to 95, 96%. They're just using analytics to look back in history. So it's a lagging thing. Whereas some of the technologies that we work with Professor Endo and Professor Silva, is we're trying to predict what's going to happen, but we're also trying to prescribe what's the action that we should do. What should we do to make things happen? And so only 10% of the Fortune 500 are using analytics, and only 2, not percent, so it's 2 out of 500 are at the high end of that spectrum, doing predictive and prescriptive analytics. And Pierangelo and myself, until last year, every year went to a Fortune 500 conference where all the executives of the Fortune 500 involved in data work, and they are miles behind. Even though we have these technologies, from a marketing perspective, we can see where we want to go, but we just can't organize ourselves to get there. And so for small companies, they're not that far behind. In fact, the reality is we are all far behind. And the key thing is, though, for our key marketing metrics, we need to make sure we're measuring what really matters. And the place to start is, well, what data do we have about our customers that allows us to understand them? But more importantly, is something that we can understand, whether it's demographic data, communication preferences, purchase history, customer service data. So how much time do they come in and repair their devices, etc. And then, and only then, we should be looking at the online data. And smart personalization is important because it increases repeat purchase and retention and order rates, return visits, and engagement. But it requires experimentation and optimization. I say this because if you want to become a marketer in the future, or you want your business to excel in marketing, particularly digital marketing, you need to become more scientific. And what more scientific actually means is you need to collect and organize yourself to collect data. You need to personalize the experience with your customers. And that requires experimentation and optimization based on that experimentation. And that is the scientific method. And what they want is improved experiences. They want their information protected. They want to be treated fairly. And more importantly, they want you to deliver on your fundamental brand promise. They want you to do what you promised, deliver the experience or the product or the service at the quality level that you promised them. And unfortunately, that is often not the case. And so, we have this famous phrase, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And that was an Irish guy, Lord Kelvin, said that. But another one of his quotes is, when you can measure what you're speaking about and express it in numbers, you know something about it. And here's the thing is, we need to know something about it, but that's having the data is just the bare minimum. So we need to advance what we mean by the marketing science. And then what we need to do is align our salespeople on those things. So we have sales and we have marketing. And often we think, oh, I'm only responsible for making people aware of the product. The salesperson is going to do the sales. But the reality is the marketing person delivers the leads to the sales. And they need to be incentivized in the same kind of way. So sales and marketing need to be aligned on measurement so that they're both doing the right job. And increasingly, we don't talk about the role of sales in digital marketing. And I think that's incredibly important. I'm not going to focus on it too much tonight. But I will leave you with this is, what do I think the most important things to measure from a marketing strategy perspective are? Number one, what is the win rate for marketing sourced leads? So how many of the leads that marketing delivers, whether digital or otherwise, result in sales? What is the renewal rate for marketing sourced leads? Are there differences in the products that are generated from marketing sourced leads versus sales related leads? How much new business comes from those leads? And what's the average deal size for those leads? And you'll notice that in all those questions, I don't talk about digital. Because the fundamentals are, whatever marketing works for you, that's what you need to focus on. But these 5 questions are critical for the success of any business. So that's all I have to say. I'm sure I've lost many of you with my very bad diction and lack of Portuguese, but that was my wandering observations on digital and digital marketing. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but I'm equally happy if you don't have any questions. So thank you very much, Cleve.
Thank you, Theo, for all your presentations. It was awesome. I think there are some guys here with some questions. I have my question for myself also. I have some questions for you. I started.
Let me have some coffee first.
Oh, okay, that's great. We have a question here from Crystal Hanna. She asked a question about if the media are exploiting the social media and the digital media, exploiting the way we act by impulse. So we have to think about being more rational when we use this kind of internet or the information from the internet.
Yes. So, but I think what you have to understand is that the way social media makes you feel and how it adapts your brain chemistry means that you might not be able to control yourself. Because social media in particular is more like a habit of a drug addict. It's when you're on social media and you post a picture on Instagram and you get people saying, oh, I like that picture, or they'll comment that picture. What's actually happening in your brain chemistry is you're releasing oxytocin, which is making you more pleasurable. You're going, oh, this is great. I feel great. And you want more of that feeling. So you post more images or you post more, you interact, and you get a better feeling, and etc. and so on. But then when you don't get those likes and people unfriend you, you have a negative feeling, you feel sad. And in fact, psychological studies show that being unfriended on social media hurts more than breaking up in reality. And because in reality, you're not getting the same feedback from relationships all the time. But on social media, you expect that feedback all the time. You post a picture and no one likes it. What does that mean? Are you no longer popular? And so I often look at pictures that your wife shares and went, oh my God, she gets 200 likes. And I post this beautiful picture of someone I'm traveling, and I get 6. And what does that mean? So, when we think about social media and behaving rationally, we have to understand, as humans, we don't behave rationally all the time. So most of the time, we post-rationalize. We feel, we do, we think. And on social media, right, that's all accelerated. So in fact, it's very hard to control those things, because what's really happening is you're getting a response immediately, and then you're able to respond back. And so that immediacy and the lack of time to reflect on what you're seeing, and nearly the pressure to respond immediately, means that the likelihood of you rationally responding is low. But yes, you should, whether you would. And you know what? Brazilians are very passionate people.
Yeah.
So the likelihood is you're going to respond really quickly. So I don't think so.
Yeah. And another thing too, that's one question that I made myself, about this user experience and social networks. You think that we have like the company have to put like social network as a core business skill to talk to the customer, to interact and produce media, or do you think it's just have like a social media sector? And
I think so. I think that during lockdown, your students and people, I travel a lot, and so for me, it's been 6 months I haven't traveled, and so I travel around the world on Instagram, and I say, oh, I'm going to go to America, and I look at what pictures in America or Brazil, and even though we're not traveling, the amount of social media activity is still massive. People are sharing more than they ever did. Okay, and it's a way to connect with people. And I think that the difficulty with social media, Kleber, is that people say, well, what's the return of investment that I get on doing social media? I don't know whether people are coming to my shop. I don't know what this means. I know I'm just sharing. And there's a guy called Gary Vaynerchuk in America. And he said, I go and talk to people about being on social media. And all they say to me is, but what is the value of social media? What is the return on investment on social media? And his answer is, what is the return on investment of your mother? I'm a professor. I'm a successful entrepreneur. I'm a dad, and what role did your mom play? Well, I don't know. Maybe when I was a kid, she showed me lots of love, or she was patient, or she sent me to a good school, or all those things count. Can I put a number on the return on investment of my mother? She invested a lot of time in me.
A lot of work.
I can't, right? So not everything that you do as a business person, you can point and say, that's where it is. And you know what? You have the exact same problem with traditional media, because, we call it the attribution model. How do you know it's the television advertisement or the billboard advertisement or the article in the magazine that leads that person to walk into your bank and open an account? You don't know, right? You don't
never know.
So the attribution problem is a good problem, but what we do know about social media is never before in the history of business have we been able to connect with not only our customers, but our non-customers and our potential customers so easily. So why wouldn't we? So the action is, someone says, oh, should I be on social media? So why wouldn't you be on social media? Explain to me why you would not want to talk to your potential customers, because that's someone who doesn't really understand sales. So that's not a marketing question. That's someone who shouldn't be in business.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably a bit strong.
But it's true, because in Brazil, they start to get value.
I feel really passionate now.
They start to get this value of social media right now in this couple of years. Other time I say, oh yeah, this is all stuff they don't value it too much. So they started now to perceiving this.
It's like podcasting. You know, and someone said to me, why are we doing podcasting? No one's listening to it. I said, because we're not doing it right. So, you know, the answer is, if you're not getting value from social media, you're probably not doing it right. And so I don't really understand that. If someone said to me, hey, listen, there's this mechanism and you can reach millions of people really cheaply by just being good. Yeah, I do it. And I can tell you this now, is that this is where communication students come into it, because what social media is content marketing. And being able to deliver good content is essential. So, you know, the marketing mindset is the content, the data, and then understanding the technology. But if you have content skills coming, you've just got this super, it's a superpower. You know what I mean?
I wish my students can listen. All my students can hear this from you right now.
They can listen to
the guy,
bald guy from Ireland. Go on,
yeah, but it's amazing. Exactly, I think the content marketing on social networks is really amazing. You have a great power. And
but it is very important, Clever. It's the modern marketer is 1/3 authorship, whether it's images, audio, video, text. So 1/3 content, 1/3 strategy, and then 1/3 technical skills. And those technical skills are editing and production, but they're also data. And where universities and university professors, communication programs, marketing programs,
that's what
we are failing students today by not preparing them for those jobs, because we're the wrong profile. We didn't study any of those things at college. So you're going back to do your PhD in computer science. But it's like someone, it's like going to the Wizard of Oz. It's like you woke up one morning, it's like, geez, wow, computer science. I have to start school again. And so what I think is really important for students is to be aware that you need to get those skills and to organize yourself to get those skills, because they are valuable, they are rare, and they're difficult to copy. And so if you can put them together in a package, you will be a very valuable person. But if you're a company or an entrepreneur, they're exactly the people that you want, because they will make your organization valuable and rare and difficult to copy.
Yeah, because I think here in Brazil we still have this gap between the companies understanding all this digital process and put it inside the company itself. I think in Ireland, when you talk about digital transformation optimization, the company, let's put some AI here and make some decision. The guys here still putting the 90s computer system.
Don't put down Brazilian companies.
No, I don't. I know. The average of the market.
80% of Irish businesses are small businesses, family-run businesses, and they ain't doing AI, and they're doing Google Analytics and stuff. But that doesn't mean that they can't optimize their marketing, because at a very basic level, it's just a question of saying, well, these are the numbers, these are the key things, the one measure that matters in my business, whether that's traffic or conversion or churn rate, whatever it is. And what they constantly have to do is, what actions can I take today that will move that needle towards where I want it to go? So it's going to help me grow. So I think that, you know, I'm giving you a kind of a picture of how I see digital, and it's a messy, kind of difficult area. But for small businesses, it's just, what action are you going to take today that's going to move you up the graph? Okay. And if it doesn't need to be AI, and it doesn't need to be deep learning, and it doesn't need to be Internet of Things, or any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it does need to be data. You know, it could be simple data. And the great thing about things like Google Analytics and stuff, they're free. So Google's AI will do the work for you. It'll even recommend what advertising to do. But you have to want to do those things. And I think that that's a very complex. I think that that's a very intimidating first step for small and family businesses. And again, I would encourage your college to think about what is the door in your college that someone can knock on to get that help, because your students inherently understand Instagram and Snapchat and stuff. And so, you know what? Like they can create the content that will help those businesses. And so small business, you don't need to be doing the AI and deep learning stuff. Although now I like deep learning and I like AI, but I like them for the big clients. But for the small man on the street, which is 80% of businesses, what they need to focus on: do I have a good website? Do I update my website? Do I communicate to my customers and new customers on social media? And the one thing I think is email marketing. Email marketing. 2,500% return investment. 2,500% return investment. So people go, oh, email marketing spam. You've got your phone, you've got your computer, you read your emails, right? And so, you know what? But send people emails that they want. Don't send them the emails they don't want. Send them emails they want. Stop sending them spam, But I think email marketing is the power tool, because I can put the video in there, I can put the audio there, I can send them things that they want. Pick up the phone, Zoom. Zoom is great. I like Zoom. All right. Any other questions?
I have the last one, Theo, about this artificial intelligence. How do you think you're going to change the communication part? You talk about the business process optimization. Do you think?
I think user-generated content or machine-generated content is. I think that's a challenge, and I think we are seeing machine-generated content start appearing in, I think, something like 90 of the top 100 media outlets in America now use machine-generated content for things like sports articles and stuff, because effectively you put the data in, a machine can generate these articles. And what you guys probably don't realize, and myself and Pure Angelo do work on this with other people, but we do more in terms of looking at rather than doing anything, is that, like, for instance, in most of the big websites in the States, if you take things like Zillow, etc., or MetLife, which is a big insurance company, effectively, or Amazon, okay? Amazon is using very advanced algorithms based on jackpot algorithms. And basically what they're doing is, it's not that they're doing A/B testing. They're doing millions of A/B testings every hour, and they're changing that user interface and optimizing on the fly. So what they're doing is they're using AI and machine learning to change elements in the website design. Wow. Constantly experiment and optimize your experience and learn from that. So for instance, Car Trawler, which runs all the car rental websites in Brazil, I might add, right? They changed the sequence of search results to see whether offering a free map will make you buy a more expensive or rent a more expensive car. And people do. So what they're doing is combining behavioral economics with a carousel of user experience elements. And then they test and test and test until they optimize. So I think that machine learning is being used to make the experimentation pipeline much more efficient. And that results in greater optimization. And that relates to machine-generated content, because effectively what's happening is the machine is generating user interfaces on the fly. And even the one that I like at one level, I don't like at a different level, is BuzzFeed and Reddit basically generate, all those memes and images, they just randomly generate those based on your words. So they have an AI that generates, particularly BuzzFeed. So if people talk about a hot dog, they generate memes and images and just start pumping it out into the feeds. And so what's actually happening is they're using AI to create what they think might be memes. And then people, if they respond to them, they become memes. So effectively, they basically created a meme machine, and then you're caught up on it, and they're creating headline machines. So what they're doing is saying, well, the main body of the content is great. Let's just create AI to make link bait, like just bait to get you to click on it. So the headlines are all being optimized with any old crap just to get you to click on that link. And so so AI is a very powerful thing, and machine learning is a very powerful thing. I'm not sure it's all AI. Machine learning is very powerful. Okay. But there comes an ethical point in that where the machine is determining what you look at and manipulating you in a way that is much more different than how I manipulate you when I do an advertising appeal. I might be appealing to you by imagery or a tagline or text in an advertisement in traditional senses. But in this particular sense, the machine is trying out hundreds of ideas until you click on one. And then once you click on it, it goes, right, Clever Murray, he likes these ads. And then it hits you with what you want all the time. And then it's manipulating you. And while you're getting a satisfied advertising experience, you're being manipulated. And so the difference is machine learning allows us to accelerate failure dramatically to the point that we arrive at a successful outcome very quickly, and then it milks you for as long as it can. So you become the battery in the matrix, Matrix. Only the battery powers the advertising ecosystem.
Wireless. You can
so really we're just part of the big consumption matrix.
Okay, it's a very dark.
Yeah, going too far again there.
Yeah. But I felt that when we were talking about the Google Watch and the Facebook Watch, but I think this is part of the knowledge of the first question, how we get more rational about all this.
Yeah, I think
had this fear of the machine, of the matrix.
I wonder, is it to do with schools, Glebe, and whether we need to spend more time thinking about signaling to people that they can trust information. And then the second thing is training people to recognize potential manipulation of data. And we see that in the US presidential elections right now, where, to be honest with you, I have a funny feeling that Trump has some kind of microcircuit in his brain at this stage, where some AI is just saying, try out this random sequence of words to see how people respond to it. And then every 10 minutes, he just says another random sequence until something clicks. And but you can see, like to put it into context, Facebook will only put a warning on something if it is potentially damaging to someone's health. I mean, every day they're putting warnings on Donald Trump stuff. Every day Twitter is stopping it, because that's how bad public life has got in America. And, Brazil is like Ireland. We look at America and go, wow, someday we want to go to America. Now you sit there and go, Genie, man, I know things, Bolsonaro is not much better, but Genie, man, I look at this and I go, and I grew up in America. So I kind of sit there and I go, I can't believe it. Like, we cannot trust government officials about what they're saying to us. And if you take Fox News, you cannot trust what the media is telling us. And that is why I think businesses have a very important role to play in the community and in society by playing a role of being independent of politics and independent of the media and saying, this is good for you, but
this sounds like
needs to be policed and regulated too, because given the opportunity, and there is always someone who will take risks to exploit other people. Yeah. So I think that you could have a very negative outlook on things. I am extremely optimistic for businesses. I think that the opportunities for entrepreneurs, for marketers, for communication students is massive. I think the potential negative impacts on society are equally massive. And I think what we're seeing right now is all the good things and bad things about technology. We've accelerated our use of these types of video conferencing tools that we can actually communicate better. We're able to work from home. And at the same time, we're inundated with misinformation and disinformation from the people that we trust to look after our health and our economy, etc. So that's a bit worrying. But you don't want to talk politics.
No, but it felt like cyberpunk when you talk about megacorps, then doing the good thing and the right thing, when they stay on the road. It felt like cyberpunk when you're talking.
Well, do you know what? Like, you know, if you want to go back that far, it is a bit like RoboCop. So
yeah, RoboCop.
Yeah. So
the policy,
and that's probably the best science fiction analogy, in that, you know, you're outsourcing a public good to a company, and you're trusting that they will manage that in everyone's best interest. But at the heart of marketing and advertising, technology, and then governance and government is the idea of trust. And trust is subtle. You know, it's a mixture of benevolence, that people are acting in your best interest, integrity, that people are honest, and the third thing is confidence, that they have the ability to perform the actions that they've agreed to do. And when we say we don't trust business or politics or media, what we mean is they either aren't acting in our best interests, they're not capable, or they're not honest. And your worst scenario is all three, okay? Now, if you say to me, do I trust Bill Gates? I'd say, yeah. But if you say, do I trust Mark Zuckerberg? No, because I've seen The Social Network. He's a lula. So from my perspective, there are fundamental things. Do I think Bill Gates is acting in the best interests of society? Yes. Do I think he's a competent man? Yes. Do I think he has integrity? Yes. Do I think Mark Zuckerberg is competent? Yes. I think he's a genius. Do I think he's acting in the best interests of society? No. Do I think that he's honest? No. And so when you combine those things, I think they're very important considerations. You know, and when we think we trust advertisers or brands, that's actually what we're doing, is do we trust them to act in our best interests with integrity, and that they're capable of delivering the promises that they make in the advertising and marketing.
So, but Bill Gates now is retired and he's not out of business. Maybe if he's still at Microsoft, he's gonna be like more like Mark.
I think Bill Gates is still active. Anyways, any other questions before it's nearly 8:45 now in Ireland.
I think we can finish now, Theo. Thank you very much for
it
was really amazing. Thank you very much, and all the guys from DCU and WCity. We are amazing, and we see you on Wednesday.
Okay, bye. It'll be a shorter presentation on Wednesdays. Okay. Listen, bye. Thank you very much, Ricardo, and see you now. Have a good evening. Bye.
Bye bye. Now, e agora para finalizar, eu gostaria de agradecer novamente a participação de todos, né, que estão aqui assistindo a gente no YouTube. Queria agradecer ao Departamento de Mídias Digitais e todo o pessoal que deu apoio para a gente para produzir esse evento, nossos alunos, ex-alunos, professores e técnicos do Departamento de Mídias Digitais da Universidade Federal da Paraíba. E também gostaria de agradecer nossos parceiros da Irlanda, da DCU University, especialmente da Business School, com o professor Theo Lynn e o professor Pierangelo, que vão estar essa semana falando mais coisas com a gente, além dessa palestra inicial do Theo. Quarta-feira vai ter mais, especialmente falando exatamente sobre análise de redes sociais com técnicas de machine learning. Então, não percam quarta-feira. Vejam mais informações no nosso site, www.bitweek.com.br, e no nosso Instagram também, @bitweek, né? Então, vejam nossas programações, nossas palestras que vai acontecer muita coisa legal ainda essa semana. Então, fiquem ligados lá, sigam a gente, façam todas as coisinhas legais de clicar, dar likes e seguir o canal, todas essas coisas bacanas de rede social, beleza? Então, é isso, pessoal. Muito obrigado e foi um prazer estar aqui hoje com vocês. E a gente se encontra durante essa semana inteira, durante os horários lá que estão programados no site. Tá? Até mais.